Jump into it. We are so happy you all are here. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our exclusive KPRC2 Back to School conversation. To our panelists and all of the participants, we want to thank you for taking the time to address this very important issue during such a time of uncertainty. We are going to get started in just a moment after a brief opening statement from our panelists, but first, the ground rules.
Thank you so much, Keith. All participants will remain muted throughout the conversation, but we do want to make sure that we hear from you. So you will be allowed to submit your questions on the comment chat section. If you are comfortable being on camera, you can use the raise your hand feature. A member on our team will unmute you, and then you'll be able to ask your question on camera.
Yeah, and we ask, obviously, that everyone remain cordial and respectful at all times. We're going to first address questions that were submitted via email throughout the week, and then we're going to answer questions that you, the participants, end up submitting.
All right, now without further ado, I want to introduce some of our panelists here who have graciously given us time tonight to have this really meaningful discussion. Let's meet our first panelist. Joining us today is CEO of Crime Stoppers of Houston, Rania Mancarius. I know you have worked so much with KPRC, and the website has such great information on cyberbullying. Rania, can you tell us more about your organization?
Yes, Crime Stoppers of Houston, a almost 40-year-old nonprofit organization, very happily serving the Houston area and beyond. The protection of children is one of our huge areas, and especially when it comes to the very real issues they deal with every day, cyberbullying being one of them. We know right now things are so different with kids going back to school, some in person, some through remote learning. And the dynamics around these relationships are changing so drastically and so quickly. So this is such an important conversation. We thank you for inviting us. Crime Stoppers of Houston is thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be here and to be amongst this wonderful panel. So thank you again.
All right. We also have professional development specialist Sharifa Charles. She's with the Center for School Behavior Health at Mental Health America. Sharifa.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor to be here with this wonderful panel, and I'm so happy to represent Mental Health America of Greater Houston, the Center for School Behavioral Health. It's definitely a mouthful. I am proud to represent an organization that has been around since the 50s. We are the longest organization that has provided mental health education and advocacy in the Greater Houston area. I've been with the team a couple of years, and we definitely want to bring the mental health lens this evening to the conversation, really thinking about how cyberbullying is deeply connected to the mental health of youth, and also just really thinking about just all the other connections and intersectionalities with mental health and cyberbullying and beyond. So really excited about being a part of this conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for being here. And of course, we could not have this panel without the co-founder of David's Legacy Foundation, Maureen Molak, whose foundation has done so much to fight cyberbullying on multiple fronts. Maureen.
Hi, everybody. I am so grateful to be with you today. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am the co-founder of David's Legacy Foundation. We founded the foundation after my son, David, died of suicide in January of 2016. And the months prior to his death, David was the target of relentless and devastating cyberbullying, and it created a serious mental health crisis in our home. And after David died, we knew that we had to carry on his legacy, and we worked with legislators to pass David's Law, and that is our current anti-bullying law in the state of Texas. And we continue to work to strengthen it over the past last legislative session, and we'll continue to do it moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much, Maureen, Sharifa, and Rania. Again, thank you all so much for being here with us this evening, all of our participants. We're going to go ahead and jump into our questions. And this first one, again, comes from an email from earlier this week. And this is really for any of the panelists to jump in on. Hopefully all of you do. This question comes from Brenda F. And Brenda asks, what are signs in your child of cyberbullying? How can you tell that your child is dealing with this? Anyone can jump in to answer that.
I'm looking at Maureen only because of her story. I don't know, Maureen, if you want to lead the way with the answer there. I'm happy to jump in as well.
Yeah, so it's really hard to determine when you have a teenager whether it's just typical teenage angst, or if there's really something seriously going on with your child. And we noticed the signs of sleeplessness and times where he was attached to his phone and then his phone wouldn't be anywhere near him, and eating habits changed, and he was depressed and moody and acting out and angry at us, and we really couldn't figure out why he was so angry. And so I think just some of those symptoms, we knew that he was depressed. We could just tell there were some serious mood changes with him. But once again, it's really hard until you start having conversations with your kids. Do you really understand what is at the heart of that? What is really causing those types of changes in their behavior?
And I'll just quickly jump in. Some of the things that we've noticed in working with families across Houston and across the state is, parents noticing changes in dynamics amongst friendships. There was a close friend for a long time, but that friend is no longer there. Or there are new groups of kids that seem to be pinging or texting or reaching out to your child that are not known to you or not familiar to you. In addition to what Maureen's saying, the obvious physical and mental changes that your child is going through right before your eyes. There are many, because cyberbullying is so pervasive rather, you're going to see changes on every level really with your child. They'll hide it for a period of time, but eventually it will reach a point where they can't hide it. And that's where the signs are going to become more apparent for a caretaker or parent in the family.
Thank you so much, Rania. And I think that is so helpful for parents as they're trying to find out, maybe they have a disconnection in communication with their adolescent teen. So those are very helpful. I want to turn this next question to Maureen. First of all, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing your story about your son's life, and how also your son's life had inspired change. Can you talk to us? What is David's Law? What are the school's responsibility under David's Law? And thank you so much again.
So when we were getting ready to pass David's Law, we talked to anybody that we felt would be impacted by this law. And so we wanted to get feedback from parents and students and educators and school counselors, mental health providers, DA. I mean, you name it. We reached out to anybody who would talk to us about this. And it's a comprehensive bill. It affects the education code, the civil code, and the criminal code. And your second question was, how does that affect in the schools? And that's really the heart of David's Law, because when we were going through what we were going through with David, and we were working with our school district, who was really trying to help us, but their hands were tied because it was happening off campus. And so you have groups of parents who really feel like that's overreach if a school is going to address something that's happening outside of the school hours. So we wanted to make sure that we gave schools the permission that if it's affecting a student's ability to be able to go to school or impacting their ability to learn, a school needed to be able to have the authority to intervene and investigate. So that was a big piece of David's Law. And then, of course, requiring all schools to have an anonymous reporting tool was really important. And I know Rania can testify to that's super important, that we give that space so that people can report and not feel like things are going to happen to, come back on them. And so that was really, really important. And there's some reporting that schools have to do now. That's part of David's Law, as well as schools now have the authority to be able to have more punitive consequences for students who do some really egregious cyberbullying.
And, before Keith takes the next question, I did cover a school where it's as simple as filling out a form on your phone and it gets anonymously sent to administrators. Is that right?
It can be anything. We didn't tell schools what type of anonymous reporting tool they had to use. And we've seen it all across the board. I mean, we have some schools that have created their own Google form. Other schools use really robust reporting tools where they can actually chat with the person anonymously who's making the report. And then there's other school districts where, you know, they may have something, you know, where a student has to put a anonymous note into a box on the counselor's desk. And so it varies across the state.
Thank you for that clarification and that understanding of that. This next question will be for Sharifa. How could remote learning that so many kids are engaged in, how could that change the social dynamics in friend groups and lead to pressure and things of that nature?
Absolutely, that's a great question. We are in a unique time, as you said at the beginning of this, and truly we're all trying to learn how do we function, right? And then for adults, I just got off doing a training for 3 hours about mental health, thinking about how do we support our students in really creating trauma-informed spaces where they can still exercise healthy behaviors towards their peers, right? Some of us are seeing videos where kids are still kind of acting out and utilizing this space to increase their aggressive behavior towards each other. And so we're assisting, and I think it's important for any youth-facing organization, including the school districts, to really create practices, right? Help classroom teachers as well as their counseling department to really implement practices that allows the students to whether address some unmet mental health needs that they may have, right? Or to really foster cohesion within that space, as artificial as this may feel for them. It's very important for us to really prioritize that they respect each other and that social emotional learning, right? How to process the feelings that they may be having, that frustration, which may lead to some of their actions that are negative towards their classmates. And so I still think, you know, outside of social emotional learning, making sure that we're really emphasizing empathy towards each other, identifying mental health needs that are not met, and ensuring that we're creating environments where positivity and encouragement towards each other is still present as it would be if we were in person, is a starting point for all of us. But it can be done. It's just about us really learning from this time.
Thank you so much, Sharifa. And it seems like it's just about getting back to the basics: respect, empathy, just really being a kind human being to another person. That maybe, you know, cyberbullying, there's a disconnect with this computer even here. The next one is an open question from Rebecca C. At what age should parents talk to their kids about the dangers online? And that's open to everyone.
I can't hold myself back, because we say, you know, we talk about this every single day, and we say start as young as you can, because you're probably giving your 4-year-old access to an iPad to even play developmental games, ABC games, you know, to watch maybe even some young YouTube kids videos. So your kids are being introduced to the online world at a very young age. We ourselves as parents are sharing information about them every single day. So the online world integrates with their lives early on. We've got to talk to them about being good digital citizens from the get-go. They can't have a gadget in their hands and not hear the same words, the responsibility of being a good digital citizen, because I'll tell you, we've done the opposite. We've thrown these phones and technology in their hands with almost no rules, because it's all developed so quickly. And then now that we've lost children to suicide, that we've seen children cutting themselves, hurting themselves with anxiety, depression, exposing themselves, doing whatever they can do to gain acceptance. Now we're going back and saying, okay, how do we fix this? I recommend start early, always in an age appropriate manner, but the principles of being kind, being a good digital citizen, reporting when you see something that doesn't look right. You can tell a young child that, and the message can grow and be layered with information as they grow with technology.
May I also add too, Rania has amazing points. I read a few studies where a lot of young people are saying that they didn't understand their rights, right? They're not reading the terms and conditions, right? It's just a disinterest to do that. So a lot of them don't understand their rights and the behaviors, the proper behaviors for engaging with social media, and that there are some safeguards that are in place, right? And so I think really empowering young people to know that as you engage with this, and when I mean young people, I mean all the way down, as Rania mentioned, we're giving 7 and 8-year-old cell phones, right? To understand that with this privilege, right? There are things that there are expectations we have and the world has, right? for your behavior on this, how you're going to engage. And if you feel like people are engaging with you in a negative manner, there are safeguards for that. And there's some decisions we can make to empower you so that this is seen as simply a tool for positivity and growth and empowerment and for proper and healthy mental health and not for aggressive behavior.
And I would just like to add, one of the things that I always tell parents is that you can almost use anything that you see online to have a conversation with your kid about it. You can always just ask that question, well, how do you think that person felt? How do you think that person that was watching that felt? So there's some very, very simple things that we can do to keep that dialogue going. And just to remember to always kind of reinforce those ethical behaviors that you have as a family. What are your morals? What are your ethics? How do you behave in person? And that translates also to the online world, and that there's no difference between real world and the online world, and that we all need to behave the same way that we would if we were talking to somebody face to face.
Yeah, Maureen, I think what I hear you saying is that, you know, obviously communicating between adults and teenagers can oftentimes be difficult, but I think it's up to us as adults to find creative ways to make sure we reach out and we're communicating with our kids effectively, for sure. Next up, we want to move to, this question is for Rania specifically. What are some areas of concern for you when it comes to new ways kids can be cyberbullied, particularly this year, this very unique year that we just started, this unique school year?
Well, it's been really interesting at the start of the school year. We had a few kids that said to us, you know, and I found it very compelling. They said, you know, for so long, I've worked on my image at school. I've had an image, and, you know, I've had close friends who know everything about my life, but generally speaking, I have this school image. And now all of a sudden I'm in a Zoom class or a Microsoft Teams class or whatever, and the whole classroom is getting an inside look of my home, my bedroom, maybe the family kitchen, the family room. I can't portray the image I wanted to anymore. And now they're faced with this dilemma of being two people to their peers. And it's opening up the door for this backlash. And what we noticed is that, you know, as teachers are teaching, chat rooms are roaring and the kids are making fun of each other, bullying each other. Oh, is that pink bedspread or whatever? That's silly, but it escalates, and it's been escalating. And so we're encouraging families to, you know, understand how their school is doing remote learning. Are they disabling the chat box? Is it only the student can chat the teacher directly, or can the whole class be chatting at the same time? Not only that, but think of where your child is when they're doing classes. We say, please don't be laying down. Don't be in your bed. Don't be on the couch laying down. Sit somewhere. It doesn't have to be in a nice plush office. It can be on the floor. It can be on a chair. But think of the image you're portraying when you're there in front of your students and in front of your class. And then, of course, there are social differences. There are groups of friends where the network is broken. One child's parents are having him or her stay home for remote learning, where the rest of their peer group is going into school. So naturally, the environment is changing for that child. So parents have to be sensitive to that. It is a completely new world. We have families and kids who are in homes that are really, really struggling, kids that are afraid to click on video or unmute themselves because they don't know what their peers will hear in the background. We worry about cyberbullying. We worry about truancy. We want kids to log on and show up and be present and not be embarrassed by their home, not be embarrassed by the family, you know, dynamics behind them, and not be intimidated by the potential bullying or backlash they're going to get. So we're encouraging parents to just be aware of these things. Talk to your kids about their value, their place, you know, how your family's going to handle these situations, and then even how you as a parent can help your child through social changes.
Thank you so much, Rania. And to ask a follow-up to this, which will be a toss-up for everyone, you know, undoubtedly so many families are having their kids sit in front of a computer screen and do Zoom classrooms with this. You know, what are your, you know, top tips? Again, it's open to anyone. The top tips that you tell your children, either rules about behavior or the ways that they do these classes in order to help your child do well with this online schooling.
Well, I'll just say Crime Stoppers as an organization is encouraging kids again to be sitting up, to be dressed for school, to present appropriately, to realize that anyone at any time can be taking a photo or a screenshot of anything on the other end of the screen, and to be mindful of what you share, what you write, what you chat, what you search, how your side conversations. And it's not about being paranoid, it's just about being safe, and it's about being, a good student and being a good classmate to your peers.
I think very much I'm very interested in encouraging the grownups in young people's lives to make sure that they're having those conversations. I think that's something that we've been saying over and over again, is if anything takes place that is uncomfortable, right? Let's talk about how your day went. How was it in the chat? What kind of energy, what statements were being made? How did that make you feel? Really helping them process. Again, that's social emotional. I know it's a term that is being thrown out quite a bit, but it cannot be ignored, especially during this time, right? A lot of our kids there's compound trauma they're dealing with. Their mental health state is fragile, right? They feel a little disconnected. We're social beings naturally. And as much as adults, we're able to manage that and find creative ways. Our young people, and I mean, even the little babies, they don't really always quite have that. They don't have the vocabulary. And so really engaging in those conversations and helping them think through, right? So if that was a negative comment, did you engage with that? Because there's that crowd mentality when you think about cyberbullying, right? And sometimes you can have guilt based on being a bystander of that. That vicarious trauma can affect our kids as well if we're viewing things that are negative and we don't know what we should be doing. And so I really want to encourage the grownups in little kids and big kids' lives to really talk to them as often as possible about how their class was and what took place outside of the academics, right? How are they socializing, and really help them with those coping mechanisms and that resiliency. That's very important right now.
Maureen,
One of the things that our foundation does is we have parents that will reach out to us all the time for help. And what we've seen that's really happening today is that with this cancel for the older kids, this cancel culture that's out there, that those things are happening outside of the school hour, right? So that's happening on social media. We have our kids, they're online 8 hours a day, but then they're also online after that for their personal time. And so what's happening there is trickling down into the school day. And so they're taking these arguments that they're having over certain social issues that are happening out there in the real world. And then they're festering, and then they're coming into the school day, which is all happening online and so I agree with what Rania is saying and Sharifa is saying that we're seeing a lot of that happening during online school.
Something, if I may add one more thing, that's something that's very unique about cyberbullying that we don't understand. I think all of us were either maybe victims, or bystanders to bullying when we were in school, but it stayed at school, right? For the most part. But now it's trickling into your home life, right? There's nowhere that feels safe, right? And none of us can really, some of us may not be able to imagine what it feels like to be under that level of stress and that anxiousness constantly, right? And now that we're quarantined, our kids are at home, these spaces are being violated. Places that used to be safe for us are no longer safe for them. And so we need to be mindful of that and empathetic, right? And graceful when it comes to having those conversations about creating a space, right? Really teaching them, again, going back to just coping mechanisms for that, but just want to slide that in.
Gotcha. And I heard the phrase cancel culture come up, and I myself have in the last couple of weeks, months, heard that phrase and really didn't get a great definition of it until maybe about a week or so ago. I'm going to ask you all to elaborate on that for parents who may not understand what cancel culture is. But first, also want to remind everybody, our participants, that you can ask questions now in the comment section, or you can use the raise your hand feature if you would like to ask your question live in person. Just let us know, and then we'll unmute your microphone, and after a couple of seconds, you'll be able to ask your question. But we certainly want to hear from that. But to our panelists, back to that follow-up question, explain cancel culture and explain how that could impact our kids during a time like this right now.
I'll go.
Maureen,
No,
go ahead.
Rania, go ahead.
No, I was waiting for you, Maureen, because you brought it up. I'm happy to
Yeah.
jump in after.
Yeah. Well, so the way that I can describe it is that if you've got somebody online that maybe says something or is supportive of maybe a political candidate or a social issue or whatever, and everybody, the other group does not like that, then they shame the person to the point to where that person is canceled, right? So that person does not exist. And so what we're seeing is a lot of that happening with our young people, that they're being so shamed, their names are being spread out on the internet, where they live, they're being threatened. And then people are actually going to their homes. And so it's gotten to be a very serious issue with our young people right now. And so I think it's really important that we understand that if we teaching our kids that if we disagree with someone, that there's an appropriate way to address that. And we really need to teach our especially our young adults how we can, disagree in a respectful way to where we're not shaming someone. And these are young people, right? They make mistakes. And so we need to remember, and we need to tell our young people that they're not defined by their mistakes, and they should never be shamed to the point to where they're feeling desperate and alone, and bad things are happening.
And can I just add to that, because when Maureen was talking before I started looking for these stats, she made the point that kids aren't online all day and they go home and they're on, or they finish school and they're online all night. And some of the stuff that they're seeing feeds into or spills into the day. We were researching not too long ago, this year, post-COVID, we've seen a 70% increase in cyberbullying in just a matter of months. We've seen a 40% increase in toxicity on online gaming platforms, and we've seen a 200% increase in traffic to hate sites. So this is like the culture that a lot of our kids are spending a lot of time in, and that does spill over into the daytime, into their social interactions with each other. We've become extremely divided. They've become extremely divided. And the way social media works is they're allowed to find their circle, everybody that agrees with them, and they just keep piling it on with people who agree with them. And it makes it much easier to isolate, cancel, bully, harass somebody that doesn't, because you kind of feel like you have an army around you, whether that's true or not. That it's always been so frightening to me, and something I think parents need to stop and think about, talk to their kids about.
And Ronnie, what was that time frame, that 70% increase in cyberbullying? Was that
this
the last
year? This year compared to last year, and that's a Pilar study. Laredo, surrounding counties did the research at 6-month period this year, first 6 months of this year.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And then when we think about that cancel culture, I call it an exaggeration of being blacklisted or being blackballed, right? So when we've had celebrities where we felt like they've crossed certain lines, right? Suddenly they're kind of people, they don't get jobs, right? You don't see them on TV anymore, you don't hear them or anything like that. And so it's kind of becomes more exaggerated, where now, although that was something that probably stayed within a particular industry, right? We now have adopted based on your political views, what you wear, what you listen to. It's something that has just become really trendy to do. And so I just want to talk a little bit about those roots of it, right? It's something that we've all kind of engaged in at some point, but it was something that was so isolated. And now we're seeing it take on a different speed and pervasiveness in its daily life. And again, with young people now, where social connectedness is so big to them, right? Unlike maybe some of us where we interacted, it was about family or we were part of different groups, right? Social media is how they remain connected. This is where they're exploring their identity, they're defining their level of self-esteem, right? And so having that cancer culture where you make you like a particular song, you wear something or you say something, and now you're isolated, you're being excluded from groups, you're being dropped from groups, all of those things, again, going back to what the ladies have said, that harassment, right? That isolation is just making the way they feel about themselves, their well-being, drop, right? Become very, very negative.
Thank you so much, Sharifa. This next question I do want to address to you. And I also wanted to put out some stats from Crime Stoppers. Their website has a lot of resources for parents who are dealing with cyberbullying. But some of the stats are among middle school students, 24% are cyberbullied. Another cyberbullying stat, only 7% of US parents are worried about cyberbullying, yet 33% of teenagers have been victims of cyberbullying. Again, this is from the Crime Stoppers website. Now, with that being said, Sharifa, what do I do if I found out my child is the online bully?
And so that's really important. I'm so happy you brought that up, Roseanne, because one of the things that, as I was doing my research and really the conversations I'm having with educators or youth-facing professionals is really thinking about not only the victim, right? Because that is our priority. That's where our attention goes to first, right? And really also considering the bystanders, right? Because of that vicarious trauma and how that guilt can really impact their mental health, as well as the perpetrator, right? We know oftentimes the perpetrator, there are many different reasons why young people engage in cyberbullying or bullying, in-person school-based bullying, right? Whether it's a power struggle or a lack of attention, at the end of the day, it's about unmet needs, right? Something is taking place and something that they need, whether it's emotional, something tangible or intangible is not being met. And so I think that the grown-ups in their lives, when they realize, right, the same way we ask for signs, if someone asks for signs and symptoms of being a victim, I think it's important for us to also look for signs and symptoms of someone being a perpetrator, right? And some of those may look similar, right? Being very secretive, not wanting you to look at their phone, right? Some of how their language, do they express empathy when something happens? Miss Maureen said earlier, there are so many different opportunities when you're watching something to engage in conversation about life, right? So when you're watching a movie, do you hear that young woman or young man or that baby say, that's sad, or, these are signs to let you know where's their level of empathy, how would they treat people, are they kind? Again, looking at their phone, I really think there's a level of, I know that, as a culture, we believe in privacy for young people, but I think that we still have to remain involved. We need to know who's a part of their social circle, right? How do they view the world? How do they view themselves? And so I think, again, following them sometimes on social media is important to understand what they're engaging in, having safeguards through certain apps, right? Deciding how much time they're spending on mass media. I know that they have mentioned that they're not quite sure if the length of time determines if you are being a perpetrator or a victim, but I think monitoring that, really talking to them about their usage of mass media as well. So I know I said quite a few things, but again, if you are concerned that your young person or the little one in your life may be engaging in cyberbullying or bullying of any kind, it's really identifying what are their needs, really speaking to them, and really looking at how are they engaging with other young people. Is it aggressive? Is it kind? Is it empathetic?
All right, we'll move on to our next question. This one for specifically Maureen and Rania, but Rifa, of course, chime in if you want to add anything. Are there criminal consequences for cyberbullying? Can teens get in trouble for it, not just with their parents and with school administrators, but are there actually criminal consequences for cyberbullying?
There are. In David's law, it is a crime to cyberbully. It's a Class B misdemeanor to cyberbully, and it can be ramped up to a Class A misdemeanor if there are certain things. Suicide baiting is one of them. For those that don't know what that means, it's encouraging someone to take their life. And there's a couple of other things that can make it a Class A misdemeanor.
I just want to add that while Maureen has had such an unbelievable experience to get to where she is now or where we all are today, the impact of David's law is so huge, and it really changes the landscape for every child across the state. And it cleared up so many misconceptions, and it created definitions and understandings and pathways and clear guidelines for parents who are struggling, for law enforcement, for lawmakers. And the word thank you doesn't feel right, obviously, because I don't know what to say, but But the fact that David's Law is here has helped countless. I deal with people every day that say, I don't know what to do. And I say, there's David's Law now. We're going to tell you exactly what to do. It wasn't that way before.
Amazing.
And I can tell you, Maureen, all of the students that have been involved in the stories that I've done about bullying have to some degree mentioned David's Law, or having that tool to use to be able to report, or feeling the confidence to stand up for their friends because of David's story. And so your son's legacy lives. Thank you for sharing him with us. With that, I want to go to the next question. With the experience that you have, this is, open. Rania, it was mentioned that maybe you had some insight to this. Do you think parents are understanding the full ramifications of online dangers?
I don't, and only because it's so complicated. And we talk to parents every single day that will start by saying, oh, it's terrible what you hear, but thank God my daughter's so sweet, or my son is so kind, or they go to such a good school, we live in a great neighborhood. And I keep saying that's all wonderful, but none of that matters with social media and the online world, because they are interacting with a completely different audience and they are stimulated. The actual developers of these platforms have made it such that they are acting in a way that is not normal, and they are looking for rewards that push them to do things that aren't normal, and they're pulled by a culture and so much that just takes them outside of what is normal for their family values. So we always tell parents, don't say if my kid were to be bullied, or if they were to bully, or if they were to see a nude or something bad. No, it's when. It's absolutely when. And it's important that we understand this and have conversations. I will say, Sharifa mentioned privacy. I'm like crazy about it, but I don't think kids, especially tweens or teens, should have privacy online. The very nature of social media is public, but yet they'll hide things from their parents. I think we have a duty to be tracking, monitoring, looking, and I don't mean going in and reading private text messages with their best friend, but having an idea of what they're posting, who's following them, all the real accounts that they have, the ones the ones they're hiding from you too. You got to push to know what those are, and you've got to dig a little deeper, because I guarantee you will find things you were shocked by, and I guarantee you your kids are navigating things where they really do need your guidance and advice.
Yeah, as a father. I was going to say, as a father of 4 girls, I love my girls to death, but I've always told them I'm your dad, not your friend. So we have to do our job. So I'm sorry, Sharifa, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, just to expand on what Rania was saying, cyberbullying cuts across all economic classes and ethnic backgrounds, right? So it's not something that any of us should feel immune to, right? And also, I think, again, I always say this, the manner in which what was norm, some of the norms for us is not the same thing for young people these days. And so I know there's a level of disinterest. So I don't want to have to understand Snapchat. I don't want to have to understand. I mean, the diversity of social platforms are amazing. Before it was just Facebook, right? Or maybe Messenger, right? And now they have all these options. And so sometimes there's a disinterest in really fully understanding those. And that can, I think, leave room for grownups to kind of feel like, no, it's fine, right? I'll leave them to it. And so I think really leaning into understanding that it is a platform that is opening them up. It's making their world bigger, which is a beautiful thing, but it also means that it leaves room for negative things to take place. And so to understand how to monitor that, and to ensure that you are ensuring that your young people have the skills to navigate it, right? Because that's what it keeps coming back to, is the resiliency, the protective factors. Sometimes young people, maybe the parent is working a few jobs. I always try to think of all different kinds of scenarios, right? Maybe the grown-up is not able to be fully present. So does that young person know who they can talk to if something negative is happening? And maybe the coach, maybe the minister, and maybe, your next door neighbor. But again, that resiliency and that protective factor. So again, parents may feel like, I just don't have the time to be as engaged. There are things I have to take care of. but that doesn't mean that you cannot ensure that there's a support system around that young person to make sure there's always a check and balance in regards to how they're engaging with social media, and ensuring that they're not engaging in being a perpetrator or a bully, right? Yes.
I always tell parents, they'll say, you know, as soon as I figure out one app, 5 more pop up and I just can't keep up. It's just exhausting. And I'll say, that's okay. I get it. I understand. You know, I was right in those exact same shoes as you are, but that doesn't mean you can't at least try. And you got to have those conversations with your kid. And I think, Keith, you were kind of alluding to this a little bit earlier. It's like, you know, sometimes for any of us who have had teenagers, know that there are times where you are maybe not getting along really great with your teenager. And so it's during those times that you need to make sure that there is somebody else in that child's life that they know that they can go to if there's something that's bothering them. They always need to have somebody that can check in with them and make sure, whether that's an aunt or a grandparent, somebody in your family or a good friend. Your kid always has to have that person in their life that they know that they can trust and go to no matter what.
Oh, indeed. Amazing advice right there. Thanks so much for that, Maureen. I mean, this conversation has been so amazing. Believe it or not, we have only about 10 minutes left, so we want to get as many questions in as possible. Real quick reminder for our participants, if you wanted to ask a question, go ahead and leave one. Go ahead and put one in our comment section. We'll get it asked. Or if you want to do it in person, just hit the raise your hand feature and you can ask that in person. But a couple more minutes. This next question for all of you. Carolina B wants to know what's the best way to prevent cyberbullying? Should children, you know, we're talking about, you know, there's a new app every, you know, couple of weeks. Should children not have social media apps at all? That's probably a lot to ask, but what's the best way to try to end this?
I'll jump in quickly. You know, I think it's sometimes unrealistic to tell kids they can't have social media because it is the way they engage, interact, socialize, communicate. But we can, as go back to what we were saying a little bit earlier, talk about how they are to behave. Listen, I don't know how many parents have sat down and thought about what their child's brand was. This is something we talk about all the time. What is your child's online brand? And every single one of our kids has a brand. They do. We may not think of it that way, but they do. They post a certain way. They use a certain filter. They have a certain language. They use their own hashtags. They're a brand. Adding to that, what are you? Are you kind? Are you is that part of your brand? Will you stand up when you see somebody being bullied? Are you the one that's going to say, look, I don't want to see that. I'll report it. I'm not going to stand for it. Is your brand to just turn around and look the other way, ignore it? Or is your brand to be the bully? You know, what is your brand? And talk about those all the time. And then as you're monitoring your children's phone, there has to be consequences when you see a tendency to lean towards bullying, to not stand up, to not defend, to not get involved. And that's the only way to, I think, deal with it. It's a give and take, and it's growing with your child as your child deals with, you know, their developmental changes using a gadget that's not even appropriate for them, given the fact where they are developmentally, but it is what it is, and they're all using it. There's also technology out there. Bark.us is a great company. We love them. It's not an expensive app to buy, but it helps monitor your children's phones for you. All the different apps, all the different games. You know, if you see language that's related to cyberbullying, suicidal ideation, predatory behavior, sexual content, you know, requests for nudes, all of that. And it's a good thing as sort of a tool in a parent's pocket.
And we just put that link to Bark US in the chat section if anybody wants to check that out, any of our participants. Just FYI.
Yep, it's right there. And please, this is your chance. The experts are here. It's an open conversation. Parents, if you're watching online, please, let's get some questions in that chat. Joe, Tom, I see Angela, Christine, we're all part of this community together. So I want to hear from you. No pressure. But, give you some time to do that, Rania. Besides bullying one another, this is another question. What other things do parents need to worry about online? different online challenges, whether it be the number of apps that have GPS tracking tied to them, the increased percentage of online solicitation of minors, up by 93% in 2020. What are some other things that parents should take note of?
I think parents need to be really cognizant of the fact the online world is become a really complicated, almost dark place, and pornography is everywhere. It's literally everywhere, and it's not just pornography, but it's like triple X rated pornography. It's a click away, very easy to navigate, very easy to get to on regular apps, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. It's literally right there. So children are being exposed to this at a much younger age, obviously before they're physically developed, before they're mentally developed, before they understand what's going on. And it's changing the dynamics in relationships. It's changing addictive behaviors. It's changing aggression and patterns there. And it's something we're really worried about. We're very, very concerned. On the flip side, we know that children today they're hypersexualized. They intuitively know that the way they dress, the subjective, the sort of body language they use, the words they use, the more sexual it is, the more likes, the more clicks, the more follows they're going to get. And they learn that young. And that's worrisome, because where does that, I go back to, what is your child's brand and who follows them and why do they follow them? These are really important conversations to have with your kids. What is your child's point in posting that way? Are they only online to engage with friends, or are they online to become famous, to become an influencer? Are they online because they need the attention? It all comes together to talk about, to the statistic, a 93% increase in the online solicitation of minors just this year. When you have a culture that is hypersexualizing kids that understand this is what we're asking of them, and then pornography in 2019, porn sites, my mouth dropped. Porn sites received more traffic than Amazon, Twitter, and Netflix combined. So that is the culture our kids are being raised in, and they know it, and they're tapping into it.
All right, a few more minutes. I think we can probably get another question in before we come up with some. We'll have final thoughts from our panelists. One quick question: does it ever make sense for the child, the victim of cyberbullying, to confront in some way the perpetrator, or is it always best to take that to an adult, take that to a parent, take that to an administrator or a teacher?
Yeah, what we tell kids is that if they feel comfortable standing up for themselves, we want them to do that if they feel like they're in a safe place to be able to do that. That helps build that character and that resiliency, be able to get through that and to stand up for themselves. But not every child and not every situation is going to warrant that child who's the victim to be able to stand up, to be able to know that they can always go to an adult for help. And that's where the schools can be so impactful and so powerful, that a child knows that if they go to an administrator at their school and the administrator deals with it, that they feel protected. And all of our students really need to feel protected at school.
Maureen said it perfectly. That's what I was going to say, right? If they feel empowered enough, then that's wonderful. We're teaching them boundaries, right? And their identity to be protective of themselves, but only if they're safe, right? Only if they're safe. And I think it's really important for adults to be familiar with their school district. Our city is massive, right? Our state is even bigger. And so it's important to know what your school district is doing. I interact with a lot of school districts, and I've seen some amazing programs, right? That I know were inspired by Maureen, her son, and her family's work. And so seeing some of those robust programs and seeing how they're building them out to ensure the safety of kids is really important. And if you don't have that, how do you advocate for that, right? Knowing that there are resources and organizations that will help school districts really make sure, especially in this time, right, where this virtual world is the current world for them, it's important for school districts to make this a priority. I'm just wanted to add that in there.
Thank you so much, Sharifa. All right, so Joe, thank you so much for participating. We got your question, and yay, at the end, we got someone who's asking a question. This is it from Joe. What is the step-by-step procedure to reporting an incident? For example, if your daughter, while doing online classes, makes a comment or informs me about an issue regarding bullying, what information do you typically need? Time, date, classes, teacher's name. Again, thank you so much, Joe, for your question. We'll make sure to get it answered.
Well, I think you actually gave a lot of the answer, Roseanne. Yes, time, date, information, take down everything you can possibly, and then report. And don't be afraid to speak up for your child and be an advocate for your child. And I tell my own kids, listen, I'm never going to embarrass you. If you know that somebody's doing something, I'm not going to sit there and call this person out, call everybody out and embarrass you. We can handle it very, very quietly, but we are going to handle it. So, and if you must, you can get law enforcement involved depending on the severity of the cyberbullying.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe.
All right. Let's, man, what an amazing conversation. I wish we had, 2 hours to talk about this, but a lot of really valuable information. But let's go ahead and get some our final thoughts from our panelists. And Maureen, we'll go ahead and start with you.
I think that we need to kind of change the conversation. I think we're used to thinking that, kids need to be tough and girls are just mean, but we've gotten to a point where things we're beyond that right now. And the CDC in 2017 categorized bullying and cyberbullying as a very, very serious mental health issue that's affecting our young people throughout their lifetime. And it can manifest into things like drug addiction, self-harm, as I know, and lots of other, serious physical and mental health issues that can impact somebody for the rest of their life. And so by addressing these situations at the school level and at the community level, we can make a difference. And it's about everybody coming together as a community and making an impact and doing your part to address the issue of bullying and cyberbullying in our young people.
All right, Sharifa, if we could get your final thoughts.
For sure. Well, Ms. Maureen stole everything I was going to say, right? And she said it beautifully. So everything that she said, it's very important for the grown-ups in young people's lives to understand that cyberbullying is very much connected to their mental health, right? To the mental health of the victims, the perpetrators, and the bystanders, right? It's important for us to really address and look out for the signs and symptoms that are taking place. So again, we went through some of those, right? Understanding that we want to focus on the protective factors in young people's lives, their resiliency, right? And that doesn't mean that they ignore everything, but it just simply means that they understand where they can go to for support. Their self-esteem, their social emotional state and well-being is crucial for them to continue to be, as Rania said, good digital citizens in this time. And so I encourage you again to engage in all the wonderful resources that you've heard today from us. We are here to support you all, and it can be done, but we're here to protect young people's lives and really make sure that they are mentally and emotionally healthy. Thank you.
Be good digital citizens. We hear you, Sharifa. Thank you. Before we let you go, we do want to let you know about an event that's happening. Maureen, would you be able to tell us about your screening taking place in October?
Yeah. October 1st, it's anti-bullying month is the month of October, and we are doing a screening of a film called The Upstanders. And there is a filmmaker out of Seattle that came to San Antonio, actually went all over Texas and filmed about our story and the work that we did in getting David's Law passed. And it's a global film. And I hope if people want to go to our website, davidslegacy.org, and sign up. It's a free event. And we're going to have a panel afterwards. And we hope that everybody will join us and share it with their schools and take it to their students because it's an important topic for everybody to understand. Thank you for letting me say that. Thanks.
Yeah. And Rania, you're next.
I want to thank you all for allowing us to do this. Crime Stoppers of Houston has been in this business for a long time. We just launched a podcast. Follow us on the Balanced Voice podcast. Please, I've got to plug that. I want to say two things. Parents, if you feel overwhelmed, it's understandable. Remember, your children are online brands. I know that sounds weird, but just talk to them about what their brand will be, no matter what app, no matter where they go, what they're posting, how they're going to respond, how they're going to report. 2 films to watch: Social Dilemma and Childhood 2.0, I think are great. And they kind of explain a lot of this to parents in an easy way, but also to kids. I think they're great, great, great documentaries. And then my very last point, we've had a lot of social media platforms and a lot of these places where cyberbullying takes place to say, well, we have rules. Sharifa mentioned it. We have these standards that kids have to sign up. They agree. Nobody reads it. But, supposedly there are rules of engagement of how kids should behave, but they don't. And then the platforms say, well, we can't really do much about it. This last year, I've seen these same platforms remove comments that they didn't agree with when it pertained to COVID, or remove comments that were political in nature that the platforms didn't agree with. So it kind of made me think that the platforms are able to actually do more than they say. So maybe it's time for the community to start looking at the platforms and holding them accountable too, for having this sort of gateway, this open mechanism for kids to really, really harm each other to the point of children taking their own lives. It's time we start looking at accountability there as well.
I like the way you're thinking, strength in numbers, right? All right. Well, thank you again so much, all of our panelists, for joining us this evening. Thank you for the participants who joined tonight's discussion as well. I hope this was informative, helpful. If there are any questions that were not answered, or if you have any more questions, feel free to submit those to our website at click2houston.com.
And also check click2houston.com/back-to-school to look for any information or have any questions that you still want to ask. Again, thank you so much for your time, panelists, and also those who are watching online via Zoom. We so enjoyed hearing from you all, and we enjoyed being part of this community together. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.